Welcome everyone to our USA-NPN Redbud Phenology Training webinar. My name is Erin Postumus. I am the Outreach Coordinator with the USA National Phenology Network, and I am happy to be joined today by Dr. Jorge Santiago Blay with Penn State York and the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. We're going to be getting started here with our presentation. We are recording this webinar and we will be sending out the recording to everyone who registered. I will ask that everyone remains muted during the webinar. We're going to have a Q&A period at the end. You'll probably see at the bottom of your Zoom screen that you'll have a chat box and a Q&A box. If you have questions that you'd like to ask for Dr. Santiago Blay or myself, please put those in the Q&A. That'll help us keep track a little bit more of the questions. But if you have other things that you want to say to us, you can put that in the chat. If you have any technical issues, feel free to put that in the chat. All right. So the plan for today is we are going to start out with an overview of the research and hear about why we started this campaign and why the data that you are going to collect are so important. Then we're going to look a little bit at the last 3 years of this campaign and talk about what we've learned so far. Then I'll give a short overview of the USA-NPN and Nature's Notebook. And then we'll give an overview on how to get started in participating in the campaign and talk about some of the training materials that are available to you. And then, of course, we'll have our Q&A period at the end, so you can ask all of your questions. I would welcome you now in the chat if you want to let us know where you're calling in from. I know we have people from all across the country, so feel free to let us know where you're from.
Wow, that's really amazing, the diversity.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Santiago Blay, to kick us off with the research that's behind this campaign.
Thank you very much, Erin, and good afternoon or good morning, whatever all of you may be. I recognize some of your names, so thank you to all. Okay, so I began this project in late 2018, and because I was looking for projects to do with undergraduates at Penn State York and with volunteers at the National Museum of Natural History in Washington. And a colleague of mine who studies bees encouraged me to do some research on Cercis canadensis, or Eastern North America redbud. And that's what I did. And so this project has gone through the pandemic, and the slide on the right panel shows some cups, some plastic cups that I used to collect bees, and all of those cups are attached to redbud trees. Okay, next slide, please. So okay, so one of the most interesting things that happened was that in year 2020, and now we are within the pandemic, so going to the field to my favorite place, the Richard M. Nixon Park in York County, was an incredible experience because normally there are, a steady flow of visitors, but during the pandemic, it was significantly depopulated. Anyways, one good day, I noticed that the redbuds were or had not produced any fruit. And all of a sudden, I wondered, oh my God, maybe my pups to collect insects have sucked all of the pollinators in the state of Pennsylvania. And of course, that was completely wrong. I just needed to drive out of the park to observe that indeed almost no redbud had a single seed pod or legume, which are, the common names for the fruits. And so that was the beginning of one of the several projects we have been engaged in since late 2018. And the punchline for this phenomenon had nothing to do with global climate change, but very simply that there was a late spring frost in year 2020 that probably fried the reproductive organs of the redbuds. And as a consequence, no reproductive organs means no, no babies, no legumes, no fruits. Next slide, please. All right. So what other projects have we been working on? So the two panels to the left represent the distribution, first of all, of Eastern North America redbud. It is on the lower left panel, so it is essentially Eastern North America and spreading all the way to, I don't know, Nebraska, Kansas, etc. But please note that it's also present in northern Mexico and as an ornamental in the rest of the continental USA. The panel on the upper left is the distribution of one of the many pests of Eastern redbud, which is called the redbud seed beetle, simply because mama beetle, shown here, lays eggs on the kind of juvenile seed pods, and then the larvae emerge from the eggs, penetrate the developing seeds and feed on them, eventually exiting as an adult, as a beetle, leaving a roundish hole. Next slide, please. Okay, I was doing that about 2 hours ago. So one of the other projects we have is what animals, if any, eat redbud seed pods. And for that, we are using trail cameras. And that's me collecting the redbud seed pods to offer them on colanders or whatever device we may have handy. Here is a colander, here is a trail cam, to try to capture digitally animals in flagrante delicto. What's the importance of this? Because we want to know if animals are responsible for dispersing the seeds. If you want to work on this particular project or help us, send me an email. And these are my emails, and I'm sure they will be repeated at a later time. Next slide, please. Another project, but this is much easier. Someone has claimed in the literature that redbuds are wind pollinated. I don't think so. And most of the literature says no, that is insect pollinated. However, we are trying to exclude wind pollination, and we have done that in the past 2 years by simply placing organza bags, shown here, these big white bags, kind of gently placed around the flower buds, and so far the result has been 0 legumes, zero fruits. And obviously the organza bags allow wind to go through. So we are pretty sure that wind is, it's almost impossible that wind is has any bearing in the pollination of Eastern redbuds. Next slide, please. Another project we began last year is to try to see if we can propagate through seeds different species of redbuds. There are, by the way, about 10 species in the genus Cercis, 10 different kinds of redbuds. We have here 5 of them: Canadensis, Chinensis, Occidentalis from Western North America, Gigantea from China, Siliquastrum. This is the real Judas tree from the Mediterranean region. These seeds have been placed in concentrated sulfuric acid. Do not try that at home. Seeds can take it, our hands cannot, for a long time. And so that corrodes the seed coat, and then after a good chill, some of the seeds will germinate. But we are trying to design a universal recipe, a universal protocol, how to propagate redbuds from seeds. Next one, please. Okay. Often we're asked the questions, you know, how if my redbud at home is a specific cultivar? And yes, there are spaces to place that in nature's notebook. In this cartoon, I am just trying to show some of the variation in redbud. Canopy can be well, like what I like to call a regular roundish canopy, or the tree can be shrubby, or it can be more columnar. This blue is a mistake. I meant to put burgundy, but leaf color is another axis of variation. Can be burgundy, can be the regular, of course, green. Some of the cultivars don't know that it is not the fall. That's the beautiful cultivar Rising Sun. The leaves, as shown here, are almost always yellowish, and of course there is a good deal of variation within the flower color from magenta all the way to white. Typically is kind of middle of the road pink. Next slide, please. And by the way, there are many cultivars, over 100 of Cercis canadensis. This is one of the key questions we have. Is there evidence of an earlier flowering and fruiting because of increased global temperature? And we have preliminary evidence, but we need to get more to support our suspicion that indeed, like in many other plants, everything is happening a little bit earlier, just like when I was a little boy. I was eager to eat the wonderful cakes that my paternal grandmother used to fix, and I was always eager to open the oven, and grandma will slap me, and I will ask her to crank the temperature of the oven so that the cake could be done earlier and I could begin eating. The same story with global temperatures. And for that, we are not only using the records that the citizen scientists like all of you provide, but there are big libraries of pressed plants called herbaria around the world, especially in Eastern North America. And they have records of when were redbuds flowering as far back as the 1820s. So we are trying to use that to have good data and then, make a statement about that. Next slide, please. I want to thank, and there are many citizen scientists, many volunteers, students from Penn State, York, and elsewhere. So I just want to thank all of you. Thank you. And I think that's my last slide, right?
So, thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. So that was a great overview of many of the research projects that you're working on related to redbuds. I think another reason why we love redbuds is they're just such a beautiful icon of spring, and they're one of the first plants to really bloom in the spring, and they really stand out for their beautiful colors. This map shows within the United States the general ranges of the western and eastern redbuds that are part of this campaign. Although you may find redbuds in other states, so if you are in one of the states that's not colored in tan on this map, you can still observe redbuds if you have them. And we'll talk more about, whether you have a cultivar or a variety and what to do about that later on. So the redbuds, as I mentioned, they're one of the first things to really bloom in the springtime, and it can be an easy way to identify them is often when the larger deciduous trees are not yet leafed out, that's when you'll see the redbuds blooming. So if you're looking for a redbud tree to monitor, that's a great time to go out and try to find one. And they're really trying to take advantage of that time when there aren't any leaves blocking out the sunshine from the trees above, so they can really get a jump start on their photosynthesis and their activity in the springtime. Generally, redbuds will flower before they leaf out, but often as soon as the flowers start blooming, you'll get these leaf buds that you can see here on the left side. So the flowering and the leaf timing is very similar. Just looking back at the last few years of this campaign, we did kind of a pilot year in 2021 and then really launched the campaign in 2022. So this map shows all the different sites that have participated over the last few years. So you can see all the triangles here on the map represent people who have observed eastern redbud, and then the circles are western redbud. You can see the darker icons represent the locations that I've observed for 3 years. So we have quite a few of those. So thank you if any of you are on the call today. We really appreciate your efforts. And the more years that you observe, the more valuable your data. You're tracking the same trees over time. So being able to compare your same individual tree and what's happening with the phenology from year to year is really important. So thank you so much for participating over different years. Now turning to look at some of the phenology that's been reported. So this is a graph that shows the open flowers reported for eastern redbud over the last 3 years. What we're looking at is the proportion of yes records. We'll be talking more about that in a minute, but when someone reported a yes to open flowers, that'll show up here. And then on the x-axis here is just the year from January 1st to the end of the year. So you can see as we go through the months, the proportion of those yes records starts increasing. And there is some variation we see over the last 3 years. We see some early activity in last year, 2023, that looks to be several weeks earlier than in previous years. We can also look at kind of the peak when the most people were saying yes for open flowers for their redbuds. And that still was only about 55% or so of people that were reporting yes, so not all trees. But the peaks are a little bit different from 1 year to the next, with 2022 being the latest that we see. We can also add in western redbud. So we added western redbud to this campaign last year. There are a lot fewer records for that species. So we can see this is a little bit more consolidated here with the peak. With the eastern redbud, this is a plot that's looking at all of those records that you saw on the map. So there's quite a bit of regional variation there that might be kind of showing up in the extension of how long this flowering period is. Whereas with western redbud, it's kind of a more densely located area where those plants occur. So you have a shorter flowering period here. But we did have some people reporting yes for open flowers even late in the close to the winter time here last year. And then we're also looking at ripe fruits. So this is the graph showing the last 3 years for eastern redbud. We can see that the fruits really start ripening even in the summer months. There are even some that are reported ripe in the late winter. And because redbuds tend to hang on to their fruit for a long time, we do see that yes for ripe fruits continuing really throughout the year, but that peak is generally occurring in the fall. And then adding in western redbud here, we don't have a lot of records for those, so it is a little bit more variable, not as consistent. But we did have people recording yes for ripe fruits in the fall and then through the winter months as well. But we're hoping as we add more years of data, more of individuals for that species, we'll have a little bit more of a clear picture of when the ripe fruits are available for that species. So we have several questions that we're interested in with this campaign that you heard about earlier. We're interested in just, is the timing of the redbud flowering different across different parts of the range of this species, and then also across different elevations? We're also interested in whether there's a cycle to fruiting. So, you might know with some plants, there's a masting where there's a lot of fruit that appears in a particular year. You might see this happen in oak trees or maples. So we're interested in seeing if there's evidence of that as well with redbuds. And then we're also looking at the impact of climate change. So are we seeing a shift to earlier flowering and fruiting of redbuds in recent years? All right, so now we're going to switch over to talking about how you can get involved in tracking redbuds to help support this campaign and help answer those questions. So just a little bit of background on the USA National Phenology Network. We were established back in 2007 with the purpose of collecting, storing, and sharing phenology data and information. At the time, there wasn't really a standardized way to do this across the United States. So our protocols that we established are really meant to have that standardization so that people, wherever you might be in the country, can all be trying to observe in the same way so that we can compare your data across the country and also across years and really see how things are changing and shifting with phenology. There are lots and lots of applications of phenology. Just to touch on a few, one of the more obvious maybe is understanding ecology, looking at things like plant and pollinator relationships and potential mismatches. But phenology is also really useful for understanding things like wildfire risk, knowing about when plants are greening up, when they're senescing or browning down, and what the fuel load might be and the risk for a particular year. We can also use phenology to understand invasive species and how to manage them, knowing about when different plants are greening up and when they might be more impacted by herbicides that you might spray. There's also lots of applications for agriculture, knowing about when to plant, harvest crops, also knowing about different pests that might impact agriculture and when to treat them. And also pollen, you might be an allergy sufferer. So we can look at open flowers of plants to know directly when pollen might be released, and then also better understand not only the timing, but the severity of allergy season in a particular year. And then also other applications for things like forestry, knowing about the timing of insect pests and when to treat them. Phenology is also a great indicator of climate change. So phenology can be maybe the simplest process to track climate change. It's something that anyone can observe. It's something that's very visible. You can go outside in your own backyard and record it. And you can start to see evidence of things that might be shifting. So timing that's shifting, relationships between plants and pollinators that may not be at the same time as they once were. I also like to share an example of why long-term records are so important. This example here is, you might have heard of Aldo Leopold. He, for a long time, recorded the first appearance of different flowers and birds up in Wisconsin. And he kept track of when he would see the arrival of different sandhill cranes and geese. And that record keeping was continued on by his daughter, Nina Leopold Bradley. And then that research was actually analyzed. And because of that long-term record of many decades, over 60 years, the researchers were able to see that there was a shift in between when Aldo Leopold first started recording that phenology information and then when Nina Leopold Bradley was recording it, and found that there was a shift of several weeks in the first arrival of these different birds. So it just shows that, you know, being able to record the information you see is just so valuable. If you write it down, record it in a standardized way, that data can be used to help understand how things are changing over time. I'd love to hear about how you all keep track of seasonal cycles. I'm going to launch a poll, and it just has a couple ways that you might track phenology. You should be able to pick different ones if you want to select multiple options. But go ahead and report. Maybe you're already a Nature's Notebook observer. Maybe you keep a nature journal or you take photographs that kind of show when things are happening with plants and animals. But we'll give it a little bit of time for people to fill out and see how people are already tracking phenology. So I'm seeing a lot of Nature's Notebook observers. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to give it a little more time. We have almost everyone has reported. Okay, I'm going to share the results. So we do have quite a few people, about half of the people who filled out the poll are already Nature's Notebook observers. And then a lot of people also contribute to other data collection platforms online. There are some people that keep nature journals, that take photographs, write on the calendar. Some people track in other ways. If you want to share in the chat the other ways that you keep track, that would be great. And then some people are not yet keeping track, but maybe they will be at the end of the webinar. Thanks for sharing on that. You might have to close the poll on your screen. You could just do that with the little X on the window that shows up there. So I mentioned that the goal of the USA-NPN is to collect, store, and share phenology data. And the way we do that is through our Nature's Notebook program. So this is a national scale plant and animal observation platform. This map shows the different sites or places that are collecting data across the country and the density of data records that have come in from those different locations. So the circles that are on there represent places where they've recorded a lot of data. So we have, you can kind of see on the map that the pattern in the data is really following kind of the urban centers across the country where we have a lot of people in cities, we have a lot of people collecting data. But we do have some people in other parts of the country as well, kind of helping to fill in those gaps in data. So we really appreciate those sites. We're almost to 35 million records in the National Phenology Database so far. So there's a lot of data in there, and we're really grateful to everyone who's contributed to that data set. One of the ways that we invite people to collect data is to join one of our Nature's Notebook campaigns. So these are the different campaigns you see here, and the Redbud Phenology Project is one of those. These are all campaigns that are inspired either by researchers like Dr. Santiago Blay or people like natural resource managers who have approached the NPN and asked for data on particular species. So if you're interested in checking out some of our other campaigns, I invite you to go to our website and see some of the other campaigns that might be near you that you can join. All of the data that are collected through Nature's Notebook are made freely available. One of the ways that you can explore the data is through our visualization tool. This is a tool where you can plot any of the data that are collected by not only yourself, but other observers. We have a set of what we call seasonal stories that can help you kind of learn how to use the tool, kind of serves as a tutorial, and it explains how to manipulate the tool to look at different species. But if there's something in particular you're interested in, you could look at Redbud, for example, you can use our Data Explorer tool. The data that are submitted to the National Phenology Database have been used in over 140 different peer-reviewed publications. And I always like to mention this because I think it's really important that you know that all the effort that you're putting in, all the data that you're submitting, are actually used by researchers to learn about phenology and how things are changing. These are just a few of the examples on the left here. And we also do what we call publication summaries. These are highlights of different phenology publications that use your data, and we send those out in our newsletters. So they're also available on the website. We have a brand new website that we just launched a couple weeks ago. And right on the homepage of that website, you'll see a news and publication section. So you can check out those summaries that are public-friendly summaries of some of the recent phenology pubs. So next, we're going to go through an overview of how you can get started with observing with the Redbud Phenology Project. Basically, the steps are to create a Nature's Notebook account, add a personal site, add a Redbud to your site, record the data, and then make sure you sign up for our campaign email. I'm going to go through each of those. So we highly recommend getting our Nature's Notebook mobile app. You can actually do pretty much everything on the mobile app now. You can sign up for an account through the app, so you can find it in your App Store or Google Play Store. And you can also, if you don't want to use the app, you can do everything on the Nature's Notebook website as well, which is just the link that's here at the bottom of the slide. So once you create your account, you'll be taken to this screen where you'll be able to set up a site. So you'll select create a site, and then you can either use the map, you can move the map around, or enter your address in, and that'll set up a site at your location. As far as location or what your site represents, if you're only tracking a single Redbud tree, your site can be basically that. It's the area right around your Redbud tree. So you don't have to worry too much about how big your site is or all of that. If you're going to be observing multiple different species for Nature's Notebook, or even multiple redbud trees, you might think about some of our recommendations for setting up a site and selecting a site. So we generally recommend trying to pick something that's kind of representative. So if you have, different ecosystem types near where you are, maybe there's a deciduous tree forest or an evergreen forest or maybe a meadow, you can separate those out into different sites because we want the sites to be pretty uniform and representative. Also, make sure that you pick something that's convenient. So we want to make sure, because you will be doing regular observations on your trees, you're picking something that you can get to frequently. So it's not going to be an inconvenience where you have to really go out of your way to get there. And then as far as the size, if it's just the redbud tree, it can be just that area right around your redbud. You wouldn't want to have it be too big, especially if you're including things like animals. You want to be able to kind of represent all of the phenology that's happening within the size of your site when you make your observations. Then once you have your site, you'll be able to add a redbud. So that's this plant and animals screen on the app. You'll add plants and animals, and then you can add a redbud, either Eastern redbud or Western redbud. At this point, don't worry about the cultivar or the variety of redbud tree that you have. We'll mention that in a little bit, how to do that. So if you're already a Nature's Notebook observer and you're not yet participating in this campaign, you can either add a redbud to your existing site if you feel like it's kind of in the same general area, the same habitat type of your other species that you're tracking, or you can just make a new site for your redbud. If it's maybe farther away, or you feel like it's in a really different area, you can just create a second site. So if you would like to add some more details, at this time you can't do that on the mobile app. You can really only set up sites, add plants, and then enter data there. But if you go onto the website, you have what we call your observation deck. This is the place where you can manage your sites and even enter data. You can do everything here if you don't want to use the mobile app. So on this page here, you can edit your site details. So you can go to edit site and you can put in information about how urban is your site, is it close to water, things like that. You can also add in details about your plants. And what that looks like is this secondary screen here where you can add details about the shade status, whether your tree is wild. If you know the planting date, you can put that in there. If you know whether it's watered or fertilized, you can add that as well. And so if you do know the cultivar or the variety, we recommend putting that in the comments field like we've done here, so that you can describe and say whatever you'd like to about your tree. And that will help us know if it is a cultivar or variety and which kind. Then when it comes to recording data, this is what the data sheet looks like on the Nature's Notebook app. Basically, the way the program works is you're going back to your same tree over time and you're answering a series of yes or no questions. So each of the questions here is just a yes or no or the question mark if you're not sure. For this particular campaign, we're interested in these different, what we call phenophases or life cycle stages. If you want to record on the leaves, that's totally fine, and we welcome your data. Sometimes it's easy enough to just report on everything. But if you have limited time or you just want to kind of narrowly focus your efforts, please pay attention to especially the flowers and the fruits questions on the data sheets. So for each of the questions that we're asking, we provide what we call phenophase definitions. And so what we're trying to do here, this is an example of one of the definitions, is we're trying to take away any uncertainty or guesswork that might go on if you're not exactly sure when is a flower open or when is a fruit ripe. So make sure that you read through these definitions when you're doing the questions the first few times, just so you get to know what you're looking for. All these definitions are available in the app. There's a little eye icon right next to the question that you can tap on to see that definition. And then they're available to print out as well from your observation deck if you want to do that. And then on the landing page, we also have some photos here. We don't yet have the photos in the app, but it's something that we really want to do in the future. I also wanted to mention just kind of the way that the phenophases or the life cycle stages work. So we have what we call these overarching phenophases. So when you're asked about flowers or flower buds, you really should consider any flowering activity at that point. So regardless of whether it's a flower bud or an open flower, any flowering activity, we want you to say yes if that's occurring. For open flowers, that's when the flowers are actually open and showing the reproductive parts. So you'll have most likely yeses first to flower buds until you start to see open flowers, and then you'll be reporting yes for both flowers or flower buds and open flowers, even if they're all open, up until the end of flowering. And the same thing with the fruits. So any activity of fruits, start saying yes for fruits. Once they're ripe, start saying yes for both ripe fruits and fruits until the end of fruiting. We also have this recent fruit or seed drop. That's really meant to capture if the fruits drop and you kind of missed seeing the ripe fruits, maybe you had a month in between when you last went out to observe and you saw fruits, but they weren't ripe last time. And then this time they were already on the ground. This gives you a way to keep reporting that so you don't miss out on reporting any ripe fruits at all. And because you might still see ripe fruits on the ground when they're no longer on the tree, we have that kind of extended past the end of fruiting. A note on kind of the frequency of observations. So really anything that you can do is wonderful. We appreciate any efforts, even if you can only go out once or twice during the spring, that's still great and really valuable data. Your data are becoming part of a large record. So really any data you can record is really important. But the more frequently you observe, the more precise the estimate is of when the flowering or the fruiting started. So this graph just kind of shows that if you were observing, say, every 6 days, there's a period of uncertainty in between the last time you looked and said no, and then the first time you said yes. If you're observing every 3 days, that period of uncertainty is only 3 days, which is a little bit more useful for data analysis. Being able to know that flowering actually started within 3 days rather than within a 6-day period. And then just to look at kind of what that looks like after you've submitted data, this is another visualization from our Viz tool. And this is showing over a calendar year here for 2021, someone who was reporting Eastern Redbud. And you can see all the gray lines represent when someone said no, they didn't see fruit. And then the colored lines indicate when they said yes. And so this really can show us, when that first happened within just less than a week's time. And then all those yes records indicating the duration of the fruiting, and then the final no saying that's the end of that fruiting period. And then the ripe fruits is within that, there were fruits first and then they turned ripe, and they kept reporting fruits and ripe fruits up until the end of the year. So in addition to those yes or no questions, we also have some questions about what we call intensity. These are optional. If you don't want to answer them, that's totally fine. You can just say not sure or just don't answer at all. But this gives us some secondary information. And especially for something like fruits, it can be really useful for knowing about that question of masting, or if there's a particular cycle of abundance to fruiting. So the purpose of this is to try to get a sense of when the peak happened. So for example, when were the most flowers open on the tree, or when were the most fruits ripe? And so when you answer these intensity questions about, for example, how many flowers or flower buds are present, or what percent of the flowers are open, you're going to be putting your estimate into a bin. So this is a group of numbers. We're not telling you to try to give us an exact estimate or something like, there's 9,900 fruits on my tree. We're asking you to just put your estimate into one of these bins. And it can seem overwhelming at first. I think one technique is that it's useful, I think, is to try to rule out which of the bins it's not. So if you have a big tree that has a ton of fruit on it, you probably know that it's not one of these lower bins, and then you can try to figure out how to place your estimate into one of the higher bins. We have some more tips on how to do this in our observer certification course, which I'll mention later, where you can find that. So don't overthink this too much. Really what we're trying to do is identify the peak that's happening. So as long as you can show kind of a progression over time with your estimates, it doesn't matter if you're off by one bin, try to do your best to estimate, or just don't answer this at first. And then as you get more familiar with your tree, you can always do it later as you're more comfortable with making these kind of estimates. So once you've observed for multiple weeks, you can earn your Redbud badge. This is something that you can see on your observation deck. You can earn this by doing 6 different observations in 6 different weeks in the year. So I encourage you to check that out and see if you can earn that. We also welcome you to sign up for our messages. So these are our emails that go out about every other month or so, sometimes every month. And they really provide some tips on, frequently asked questions about the campaign. We give you prompts, like start looking for fruits on your trees. We'll also share back a lot of results. So it's a great way to kind of stay in touch with us about what we're learning about the campaign and what other people near you and across the country are reporting. So this QR code should work to take you to the sign up form. So please sign up for the campaign email so that we can stay in touch with you about what's happening this year. Also have another link for this at the end too. Okay, so we're gonna do a couple of little quizzes to see how it's going with trying to understand the different questions on the data sheet. So I'm going to launch a poll here that is basically 4 questions from the Nature's Notebook data sheet that are the flowering and the fruit questions. And so you have the question as well as the phenoface definition for each of these. And so looking at this photo, and I realize it's just a small part of this plant, but from what you can see in the photo, go ahead and read through the questions and do your best to answer yes, no, or you can always use that not sure, and answer the questions for this particular photo. And I'll give a little bit of time so people have the chance to, I know there's a lot to read through with the definition. And again, these are the definitions that are available in the Nature's Notebook mobile app, as well as there's a version that's available on paper data sheets that you can print out and bring with you into the field if you want. All right, let me give it just a little bit more time. And another thing to keep in mind, it's a lot to read at first, but after you are familiar with the questions, it's really simple to just go through each time because you might have seen your plant last week. And so we estimate that it'll take about 2 to 3 minutes to make an observation of a single plant after you're familiar with the question. So it can be really quick. Even if you have a couple different redbud trees that you're observing, it shouldn't take too long to make your observations once you're familiar with the program. All right, I'm going to end the poll and we'll take a look. So let's see. For the first question, this was about flowers or flower buds. So again, that's any sort of flowering on the tree. The majority of people said yes, which is correct. These are definitely flower buds that are on this redbud tree. We will talk about when to not record flower buds as flower buds when they're still the kind of dormant winter buds, and have a picture of that later. As for open flowers, it might be a little hard to see, but I would say no for this. There's kind of a questionable fuzzy one back here, but from the ones that are really clear, that are obvious, I would say these are all closed flower buds. So I would say no for open flowers. As for fruits, I don't see any evidence of fruits in this photo. So we would say a no for both fruits and ripe fruits. So nice job, everybody. And then you might have to close your poll too if it doesn't close automatically. And then we have one more here, which will be the exact same questions as the first time. So hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to read through. And go ahead and take a look at the picture, what you see here, and then answer the same question. And with these fruits, it is a little tricky to tell from a photo about the ripe fruit. So If you want to use that question mark, feel free. But we'll talk about when you should judge a fruit as ripe, and how long to keep reporting the fruits as well. Give it just another few seconds. Okay, I'm going to share the results. So for flowers, everyone said no, which is great. I did not see any flowers in this photo. As for fruits, almost everyone said yes for fruits. And then we had a mix of yeses and nos for ripe fruits. If we go just by the color, I think I don't know if this is considered dark brown. It definitely for fruits is helpful to be able to see your tree over time and see the changes happening. When the fruits are first there, they should be green and then they'll change to brown over time. I would probably say this is ripe fruits, but it would be really helpful to be there in person. And the other thing that's really helpful for being in person is being able to touch the fruits, because you might see this really important part of this last question. Do not include empty pods that have already dropped all of their seeds. It's really hard to know if it's empty or not when you're not there, and really be able to see it and touch it. So if you're able to feel the pods and you feel seeds inside, you should consider it a ripe fruit if it's brown. But if you see, there are some open pods, then you would probably say no for ripe fruits and fruits. And because the redbuds will hang onto their fruits for a long time, you might be reporting ripe fruits for a very long time, many months, even into the next year in some cases. So just use that judge of whether there's fruits within the pods that you can feel. If you do, then it's still a yes for fruits and ripe fruits. All right. So just a couple things to kind of recap, and maybe some new information. So some redbud trees will not flower, or they won't flower until they're several years old. So if you have a very new plant, you probably won't see flowers, so don't worry about that. That might be useful to put in that metadata or the information about your plant, the planting date, so we know that it's a very young tree. And in your observation, you can also include a comment, so you can tell us that this is a very young tree, and that's probably why you're reporting no for flowers for a particular year. And then as far as those winter buds, you'll probably see your tree put on these tiny buds that have these bud scales late in the year. And so these should not be considered flower buds because they are not yet starting to swell. You'll notice as it gets warmer in the springtime that these little bud scales will start to separate and you'll start to see that pink or magenta color. That's when you'll start to say yes for flower buds. So just hold off on reporting flower buds for these tiny dormant ones until you see that swelling. For open flowers, what you're looking for is the reproductive part. So the photo's a little fuzzy, but you're looking for these parts here that you can see within the flower. And that's when you would start saying open flowers in addition to flowers. We just talked about this, but redbuds might hold on to their seed pods for a long time. So keep feeling the seed pods. If you still feel the seeds inside, then keep reporting yes for fruits and ripe fruits. If you are reporting on the leaves, note that early in the year when the leaves first appear, they might show up as this kind of red color. That's not colored leaves, which is one of the questions on the data sheet. Our colored leaves is meant to really encapsulate either late season, that typical fall color, or coloration due to drought or other insect damage, things like that. But it should be color that's on the full size leaf. So if you're seeing these tiny leaves that are merging with red, don't say colored leaves for that. Wait until that kind of later season color that occurs on the full size. And then if you do have multiple individual trees, think about registering more than one. We always welcome you to start out with just one plant, just so you don't get overwhelmed, but it is nice to have a little bit more variation. There's always differences between trees. So if you do have 2 to 3 available, it's really valuable to have multiple trees that you're reporting on. There's a lot of training materials that are available to you. So this is on your observation deck on the website. This learning tab has a lot of great resources. One is the observer certification course, but there's also the botany primer, which is a great guide that has a lot of photographs in there. We also have an FAQ page. There's a glossary. And then the PhenoFace primer is something that we're about halfway done with that we're going to be finishing up in the next couple months. But the observer certification course, it's optional. You don't have to do it, but it takes about 5 hours or so for all 5 modules. You can just do the first module if you want, which is kind of an overview of Nature's Notebook. But there's also some modules on intensity with a lot of great tips on how to estimate intensity. And there's even a module on the mobile app as well. I mentioned the botany primer. There's also these PhenoFace definitions in print form that are available linked from your observation deck if you want to print out a copy to have with you. I also wanted to mention that we have a infrastructure for local phenology programs. This is when you're participating as a group of observers. So feel free to get in touch with me if you're interested in learning about that. We have lots of different organizations like nature centers, master naturalist groups, Audubon centers, national parks, people that are observing phenology together. And we have a lot of resources available for those people. We have a local phenology leader certification course. We'll be having one of those in the spring in a couple months. We have a lot of program planning resources and other resources available as well. All right, so just to recap, the first step is if you don't already have an account, create a Nature's Notebook account, add a site and at least one redbud tree, record your observations, take advantage of the training materials that we have, and then don't forget to sign up for our campaign messages, because that will be a great way to stay in touch with us and get results from this campaign. So I put our emails here, and then this is also the email sign up if you still need that. And now I think we have some time for questions. Let me take a look and see what we have in the Q&A, and then we can look through the chat as well. So it looks like we have one question at least so far. If I have ripe fruits, should I enter yes, even if I have made no other previous observations? Yes. So if you are looking at a tree right now, it's probably not flowering yet, although there could be some flower buds depending on how far south you are, I guess. So if you're walking up to your tree and you see ripe fruits on there, you should report a yes for ripe fruits if there are seeds within those pods. And you should also say yes for fruits, because remember, that's a overlapping phenophase. So you would say yes to both of those. And you don't have to go through the progression as it is on the data sheet. Sometimes you'll be answering no for all the first 5 questions or more, and then saying yes to the fruit questions, depending on when you're starting to observe.
If I may say a few things,
yeah.
There have been tremendous questions. I'm just trying to keep up with the questions and answers. Before I say anything else, because we are only 7 minutes away from 2 p.m. Eastern. Please, if we don't get to answer all of your questions, send us an email either to Erin or to myself. That's on the screen now is my Penn State email. If you prefer to email me at the Smithsonian Institution at the Museum of Natural History, that's fine. Is the same 5 letters, BLAYJ at SI.edu. SI stands for Smithsonian Institution. Now, let me just make a few comments here. Thanks for all of your questions, tremendous. There have been a few questions about diseases of redbuds. Now, one of the projects we have been working on is the update of the Redbud chapter in the Silvex Manual, which is like the Bible of important forestries in the USA and Canada, and I think parts of Mexico as well. Now, there is a recently discovered disease caused by fungi that affect redbuds. I don't know to what extent it may affect other species. I think that has to be determined. I'm gonna check in what we have in our chapter and send all of you, or maybe send Erin for distribution some key papers on that particular subject. That has come to our attention in the last year and a half maximum. So this is relatively recent, and there is not much literature yet that we are aware. There was another question of on what to do with any redbud that appears to be diseased. I am now remembering many decades ago my experiences in Puerto Rico when citizens will call us at the agricultural experiment station and describe a phenomenon. It's very difficult to provide solutions, verbally. So the best thing that I can recommend all of you in that particular situation is take many images and then send them. Please send them. Feel free to send them to us. But each state in the USA has either an agricultural extension or agricultural extension offices, as well as, for example, master gardeners offices. In at least in Pennsylvania, every county has some sort of agency that can help with those types of issues. So that would be your immediate go-to. But please feel free to send us images as well, because we want to document everything that may be happening to the redbuds. On the one hand, Eastern redbud is expanding because of its tremendous ornamental value. Is on the millions of dollars, big time, and is already being planted in other countries. But on the other hand, we always have to keep an eye for whatever diseases may be affecting them that we may not be aware of. Thank you. And please, please, please email us. We really try to be conscientious to reply to everyone with good scientific information to the best of our ability, at least. Thank you.
Yeah, and we can also include a lot of these great questions in our emails. So
Yes.
we often will have a frequently asked questions section. So yeah, we'll update that with some of the questions that have come in today. I did want to answer a couple of the ones that are kind of Nature's Notebook specific. So someone asked about an area without internet. Our mobile app does work offline. So you can record data, and then when you come back into Wi-Fi, it'll upload the data at that point. And then if your tree does become diseased or dead, someone asked about deleting it. Yes, you should delete it at that point if you're no longer observing it. So you can do that on the page I showed where you can enter the cultivar variety data. You can put that in there and check the box that says dead and then put the reason. And we will include this set of slides as well as the recording in the email that goes out later, the follow-up email. So don't worry about that. We'll send that along. There are a couple other specific questions in the Q&A that I think Jorge might be able to answer.
Yeah,
redbuds. Is it cauliflory or cauliflory?
Yeah. Okay, so let me see if I can find quickly. We just have 2 minutes. Cercis occidentalis versus Cercis canadensis. Next time we should put a slide. How about that? Lesson learned. Since we have the two of them. Okay. So Cercis canadensis, Eastern North America redbud, has a very characteristic heart-shaped leaf that I can try to find right away. Cercis canadensis leaf. And okay, Erin, if you could allow me to, let's see how fast my machine is. Okay.
We can
If you
also
would allow
include
me.
that in the email as well as one of the Q&A. We can include a description of how to tell the difference.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to share my screen. My computer, I'm sure, is barely hanging for dear life. So hopefully you can all see these images. Can you see them? So heart, very, very characteristic heart-shaped leaf for Cercis canadensis. Don't worry about the color. All of the different cultivars, as we try to explain, have different color color on their leaves. In contrast, Cercis occidentalis, Western North America redbud, tends to have a more rounder shape. Another way you can try to tell them, but none of these ways is absolute, is Eastern redbud tends to be more on the woody side of the spectrum, more like a tree, whereas Cercis occidentalis tend to be more on the shrubby side of the spectrum. In other words, thinner, woody, woody shoots emerging from one place rather than a big, thick trunk. But again, this is not 100%. Otherwise, the flowers of, and I have now, I believe, seen flowers of all of the species are very similar. Um, and another one to complicate this anymore, there have been many names proposed to different varieties, etc. So there is a little bit of nomenclatural controversy. So when I said there are, 10 species of redbuds, on the planet, that's the kind of widely accepted number, but not everybody agrees. There are lots of varieties depending on the temperature, etc., and oodles and oodles and oodles of cultivars, which reflect the economic interest of the plant.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
There was a
And
question
remember, you
about,
can always email us.
yeah, whether there's any interest in looking at, is it cauliflowery or cauliflowery? How the red buds form that. I don't know if it's a mutation, or is there anything you can say about why they do that?
Let me stop the share now. So the
Or it's
question
just
is about flower color.
no, how
Yeah,
the flowers are
so
in clumps
that's,
on the branch, like right attached to the branch.
oh yeah, that characteristic of the at least of eastern redbud, that phenomenon is called cauliflory. I'm going to write this word on the chat, cauliflory, meaning that the flowers can emerge from the woody parts of the plant. That's not common in the plant kingdom. I thought someone had asked about flower color and mutations, etc. Interestingly, the genetics of some of these variants, not all, of course, but some of them have been studied in some detail for Eastern North America redbud. Of course, in part motivated because Eastern redbud commands a lot of money. And the answer, fortunately, is that these characteristics appear to be determined by relatively simple genetic mechanisms, which makes life, for those who want to study genetics of redbud, at least in those particular characteristics, very, very easy. It's not complex genetics as far as researchers have discovered.
Right. And then there
Any
was
more questions?
one other question about propagating redbud seeds. If you open the pod and the seeds are green instead of brown, are they
So
viable?
very likely not. I have never experimented with that. They are not fully developed. Just like when we open a seed pod, remember, in Redbud, the seed pods do not open up. They fall to the ground, generally very close to the plant. And then little by little, they are attacked by the microbes and the seeds become available. Then in nature, microbes get rid little by little of the seed coat, which is very tough. That's why to accelerate everything, um, we use sulfuric acid concentrated, and that accelerates. That does in 12 minutes what it takes nature to do. My guess is at least more than a year. My guess it will be no, but next time I see immature seed pods, I'm going to grab a few, asking permission, plant them, and I don't think that's going to work. Now, talking about that, some of our informants have communicated to us that they get immature or green seed pods and boil them and eat them very much like edamame. I'm not recommending that. Nobody has ever told me something bad has happened. I'm just reporting. I'm not liable. I haven't done that. And in addition, um, let's see, the Cherokees used to use roots and on part of the shoots under the bark and apparently boil it to concoct a medicine with alleged gastrointestinal properties. And some people in the USA, and we learned this from a reputable site in Oklahoma, use the flowers of the state tree, Cercis canadensis, is the state tree of Oklahoma, to produce a jelly. And also from some other source, it reports that children of Native American people used to eat, the flowers. I don't know. It really doesn't taste like any candy to me, but maybe they like it.
So
Anyways,
another question
eh,
about the pods. Do red buds ever form pods that don't have seeds in them?
I saw that question and I replied to it. I am always nervous of saying never,
Mm-hmm.
but I have examined, I want to say thousands of redbud seed pods. I was collecting them this morning for from one of our experiments, and I don't remember ever seeing one with zero. Now I have seen with one or two, and additionally, seed pods can produce what's called abortive seeds, which are very tiny.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but zero, I don't remember ever seeing that. But who knows? I will I will keep an eye for the zero and reread the literature and see if anyone has reported zero.
Sounds good. And then I think maybe one last question, and I don't know if you can answer this, or maybe it's more of a question for an extension office, but someone asked about whether they should prune their tree to avoid splitting. Do you know anything
Yeah,
about whether that's a good idea?
I am very hesitant to answer that question without photographs, and that's why I strongly recommend take photos or and share with the extension agent in whatever you may live. We'll appreciate photos as well. So long as we are given permission to use images, we will be glad to use images in our publications, but we need permission.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so
Any?
we're talking about cooperative extension. Often universities,
Yes,
land-grant universities will have a cooperative extension office, and
yes,
they can often answer a lot of questions about diseases or questions about the health of the plants that you might have. And sometimes they have a in-person time where there's like a form
yes.
on their website where you can send.
And maintenance, whether to prune or just to get rid of the plant or so.
Great. Well, that was a lot of really good questions. And so we
Yeah.
will summarize these questions and we'll include the questions and answers in the first email that we send out in the next couple weeks. So I hope everyone signed up for the emails. Also in the follow-up email, include the sign up form again, and then some other links that we talked about today.
And
So yeah, go ahead.
if I may, if we may finish with a smile,
Mhm.
someone ES wrote, can confirm that Redbud jelly, which is what I was thinking, is delicious, but that might just be the sugar content.
Sounds
Indeed.
worth a try. Well,
Very
thanks
well.
so much, Dr. Santiago Blay, and thanks everyone for hanging in there with us for all these questions. And
Thank
thank
you,
you for
Dual.
your
Thank
interest in
you.
participating. We'll be in touch
Thank you.
via email. Bye.
Okay, bye.